The council chamber floated in the void between stars. It was a massive structure, built over 3,000 years ago, when the first galactic civilizations decided that talking was better than fighting. The chamber was shaped like a sphere, with 47 seats, arranged in a circle. Each seat belonged to a different species, a different world, a different way of thinking. Ambassador Chen Wei sat in the smallest seat near the back. Her chair was new, installed only 5 years ago, when humanity finally proved they could travel between stars without blowing themselves up. The other ambassadors still watched humans carefully, like parents watching a child play with fire. Humanity had no voting rights yet. They were on probation. Chen didn't mind. She was just happy to be there, to learn to see how a galaxy full of different species could work together. Today, though, something felt wrong. The usual chatter before meetings was absent. The chamber was quiet, heavy with tension. Ambassador Thixon called the meeting to order. Thixon was a Krell, a species that looked like walking crystals. Light passed through their bodies, creating rainbows on the floor. Krell lived for 500 years and thought very slowly, very carefully. They made excellent judges. "We have received a petition," Thixon said. Their voice sounded like wind chimes. "The Varani request our aid." A hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a planet green and blue, covered in farms and small cities. Then the image pulled back, showing the planet's star. The star was orange, dimmer than it should be. Red warnings flashed across the hologram. "Their sun is dying," Thixon continued. "A cosmic anomaly has accelerated its death. Calculations show complete collapse in 18 months. The Varani will have no warning. Their world will become uninhabitable." Chen leaned forward. She had read about the Varani. They were farmers, artists, philosophers. They had never developed weapons, never fought a war. They spent their time growing food and making beautiful things. They had 4 billion people spread across their single planet, and they couldn't leave it. The Varani had no spaceships. They had barely discovered electricity 200 years ago. They knew the stars existed, but reaching them was still a dream for them, something their children's children might do. Now their sun was dying, and they had 18 months. A Varani ambassador appeared in hologram form. She was small, covered in soft fur, with large eyes that reflected light. She looked tired, terrified. "Please," the Varani ambassador said. Her voice shook. "We have done everything we can. Our scientists confirmed the readings. We cannot stop this. We cannot leave. We are asking for help. We are begging." The chamber fell silent. Then the debate began. The Talmar ambassador spoke first. The Talmar looked like octopuses but breathed air, and stood on 4 of their 8 limbs. They were traders, merchants, calculators. "The cost would be enormous," the Talmar said. "We would need to build evacuation ships, coordinate transportation, find new worlds for 4 billion refugees. The economic impact would affect 30 systems, maybe more. We have done evacuations before," said Ambassador Vren of the Shapers. The Shapers were tall, thin, with skin that changed color with their emotions. Right now, Vren was pale blue. Sadness. "We saved the Cathari when their moon fell. We relocated the Shen when the plague came." The Cathari were 12 million people, the Talmar countered. The Shen numbered 300,000. 4 billion is different. 4 billion is impossible. Not impossible, Vren said. Expensive, difficult, but not impossible. The debate continued for hours. Chen listened to every word. She watched the numbers appear on screens. Calculations of ships, needed resources required, years of economic strain. The mathematics was brutal. Saving the Varani would hurt. It would mean higher taxes, reduced services, delayed projects. Every species in the council would feel the pain, but 4 billion people would die if they did nothing. Ambassador Thixon finally called for silence. "We must vote," they said. "The question is simple. Do we intervene to save the Varani despite the cost?" Chen wanted to speak. She wanted to stand up and say that lives mattered more than economics, that they had to do something, that they couldn't just let an entire species die. But she had no vote. She could only watch. The votes came in one by one, displayed on the hologram. Each ambassador pressed a button. Green for yes, red for no. The first vote was red, then another. Chen's stomach twisted. A few green votes appeared. Vren voted yes. So did the ambassador from New Terra and the Whispering Collective. But the red votes kept coming, piling up like stones on a grave. When the final count appeared, Chen felt sick. 41 votes against intervention, 6 votes in favor. The Varani were abandoned. Thixon turned to the Varani ambassador's hologram. The small furred creature was crying now, silent tears running down her face. "The council has spoken," Thixon said. Their voice was gentle, but the words were knives. "We understand your suffering. We grieve with you. But the mathematics of galactic stability demand difficult choices. We cannot save everyone. Sometimes the needs of the many must outweigh the needs of the few. We are sorry." The Varani ambassador didn't respond. She just stared at them, her large eyes filled with disbelief. Then the hologram cut off. Silence filled the chamber. Vren was dark purple now. Rage. "We have just murdered 4 billion people," they said. "We have made a practical decision," the Talmar responded. "Emotion cannot guide policy at this scale. Practicality without compassion is just cruelty with mathematics." Vren shot back. The argument started again, but it didn't matter anymore. The vote was done. The decision was final. Chen sat in her small chair, her hands gripping the armrests so hard her knuckles turned white. She thought about Earth, about her home, about humanity's history. Humans had done terrible things to each other. Wars, genocides, atrocities that still haunted them. But humans had also done something else. They had run into burning buildings to save strangers. They had given their last food to hungry children they didn't know. They had died protecting people they had just met. Humanity was messy, violent, stupid sometimes. But when someone asked for help, really asked, really needed it, humans had a hard time saying no. Chen stood up. "Ambassador Chen." Thixon said, surprised. "You have no vote in this matter." "I know," Chen said. Her voice was steady, despite the anger burning in her chest. "But I have a voice, and I need to say something." The chamber turned to look at her. 47 species, thousands of years of civilization, all watching the human. "You just let an entire species die because it was too expensive," Chen said. "You put the cost above their lives. I understand the mathematics. I understand the economics. But I need you to understand something about humanity." She took a breath. "We're new here. We're young. We're reckless. We make mistakes. But we remember our history. We remember when people needed help, and no one came. We remember when the powerful abandoned the weak because it was easier, cheaper, more practical. And we remember how that felt. We remember the shame of it." Chen looked at each ambassador in turn. "I'm going back to Earth now. I'm going to tell my people what happened here today. I'm going to tell them about the Varani. And I already know what they'll say." "What will they say?" Thixon asked quietly. Chen smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. "They'll ask me for the coordinates. They'll ask me how many ships we need. They'll ask me what they can do to help, because that's what humans do. We might not be the smartest species in the galaxy. We might not be the strongest or the richest. But when someone is drowning, we jump in the water." She walked toward the exit. "You can keep your vote," Chen said over her shoulder. "We don't need your permission to do the right thing." The door closed behind her, leaving the council in stunned silence. On the other side of the galaxy, the Varani people looked up at their dimming sun and prepared to die. Parents held their children. Artists created final masterpieces. Farmers planted crops they would never harvest. 4 billion people waited for the end. They had asked the galaxy for mercy. The galaxy had given them mathematics. But the galaxy had forgotten about one small, stubborn species that hadn't learned to say no when someone needed help. Chen's ship left the council station and jumped to faster-than-light travel. The journey to Earth would take 3 days. She spent those 3 days writing a report, choosing her words carefully. She knew her people. She knew how they would react. When her ship entered Earth's orbit, she transmitted her report to every government, every news network, every social media platform. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't go through proper channels. She just sent it. The title was simple. "They asked for help, and we said no." Within an hour, the report had been read by 2 billion people. Within 6 hours, protests had started in every major city on Earth. Within 12 hours, the United Earth government called an emergency session. Chen stood before the Earth Council. Every nation represented, every leader watching her on screens. "The Galactic Council has decided to let the Varani die," she said. "They have 18 months. They have nowhere to go. They have no way to leave." The Council voted against helping them because it would cost too much. The Earth Council erupted in angry voices. The President of the United Earth Government, Marcus Okonkwo, raised his hand for silence. He was an old man, his hair white, his face lined with decades of difficult decisions. He had led humanity through first contact, through the wars that almost destroyed them, through the final unification. "What are you asking us to do, Ambassador Chen?" Okonkwo asked. Chen met his eyes. "I'm asking us to be better than them," she said. "I'm asking us to prove that we deserve to be out here among the stars. I'm asking us to save them." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "This will cost us everything we've been building. Our expansion plans, our colony projects, our economic growth. All of it will have to stop. We'll have to redirect every resource we have. It might bankrupt us." "I know," Chen said. "We'll be doing it alone. The other species won't help us. They might even try to stop us. I know." Okonkwo looked at the other council members. He saw determination on their faces, anger at the injustice, and something else, pride. Pride that humanity had been asked to be better and was ready to answer. "Then we do it," Okonkwo said. "We save them, all of them, every single Varani." The vote was unanimous. Operation Exodus began 72 hours later. The news spread across Earth like wildfire. Within a day, every human knew about the Varani. News channels showed images of their dying world, their beautiful cities, their people looking up at a sun that was slowly killing them. Social media exploded with a single phrase that became a rallying cry: "We stand with you." The Galactic Council watched humanity's response with confusion and growing alarm. They had expected humans to be upset, maybe to send some supplies or offer token assistance. But this was madness. Every spaceship construction facility on Earth and her colonies went into overdrive. The massive shipyards orbiting Luna, Mars, and Europa stopped building the colony vessels they had planned. Instead, they started converting everything they had into transport ships. Every ship that could carry people was being modified, retrofitted, pushed to maximum capacity. The military offered half their fleet. Warships designed for combat had their weapons stripped out and replaced with living quarters. It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't comfortable, but each destroyer could now carry 10,000 Varani. Civilian companies joined in. The merchant fleet, the cargo haulers, even the luxury cruise ships that ferried tourists between Earth and Mars. Owners volunteered their vessels. "Take them," they said. "Bring those people home." Ambassador Thixon sent a message to Earth. Chen read it in her office, still tired from sleepless nights coordinating the operation. "Your response is noted," Thixon's message said. "However, we must advise against this action. The logistics are impossible. 4 billion people cannot be evacuated in 18 months. You do not have the ships, the resources, or the experience. This endeavor will fail, and you will have wasted your civilization's resources for nothing. We urge you to reconsider." Chen deleted the message and got back to work. The Galactic Council wasn't the only one watching. Every species with telescopes or sensors pointed at human space saw the ships gathering. They saw the massive fleet assembling near Earth's moon. They counted the vessels and ran their own calculations. The consensus among galactic analysts was clear. Humanity was attempting the impossible. They have perhaps 300 vessels capable of deep space travel, one expert explained on a Talmar news broadcast. Even if every ship makes 10 trips, they can evacuate maybe 30 million Varani. That leaves 4 billion behind. The mathematics simply do not work. But the analysts didn't understand humans. They didn't understand what happened when humanity decided to do something impossible. In Tokyo, a 70-year-old man named Hiroshi Tanaka emptied his retirement savings and donated it all to Operation Exodus. "I don't need it," he told reporters. "Those people need it more." In Lagos, A school class of 8-year-olds held a bake sale and raised 3,000 credits. They sent it to the operation with a note. "We want to help. We stand with you." In Buenos Aires, a factory that made personal electronics shut down and retooled to manufacture life support systems for the transport ships. All across Earth and her colonies, humans gave. They gave money, time, labor, expertise. Engineers worked 20-hour shifts. Programmers developed new software to coordinate the massive fleet. Doctors volunteered to travel to Varani space to help with medical needs. Teachers prepared to help Varani children learn human languages. The fleet grew larger every day. On Varani, the people watched their sun with growing despair. Their leaders had told them about the Galactic Council's decision. They knew they had been abandoned. They tried to stay calm, to be brave, but fear spread through the population like a disease. Parents looked at their children and wondered how to explain death to them. Artists stopped creating, seeing no point in making beauty that would soon be ash. Farmers kept working, but their hearts weren't in it. Why plant seeds that would never grow? The Varani government tried to maintain order, but riots broke out in several cities. Not violent riots. The Varani weren't a violent people, but riots of grief, of anger at the universe, of people who couldn't accept that they were simply going to die because they were unlucky. Then, 17 days after the Galactic Council's decision, the Varani picked up something on their sensors. Ships, lots of ships, coming toward their system. At first, they thought it was a mistake, maybe an asteroid field or sensor interference, but the readings were clear. Those were ships, hundreds of them, all heading directly toward Varani space. The Varani government broadcast a message. "Unknown fleet, this is Varani Central Command. Please identify yourselves." The response came back in broken Varani, clearly translated by computer. The voice was female, speaking with an accent they didn't recognize. "This is Ambassador Chen Wei of United Earth. We're here to help. We're going to get you out." The Varani didn't understand at first. Humans? They had barely heard of humans. Some small species that joined the Galactic Council recently. Why would they come? "We don't understand," the Varani commander said. "The council said no one would help. Why are you here?" Chen's response was simple. "Because you asked." When the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Varani system, the Varani people finally saw them. 347 ships of every size and shape. Military vessels painted gray. Cargo ships with corporate logos. Even a few luxury liners, their chrome hulls glinting in the light of the dying sun. It was the largest rescue fleet in galactic history, and it was just the beginning. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. Thixon stood before the assembled ambassadors, their crystalline form flickering with agitation. "Humanity has deployed a fleet to Varani space," Thixon announced. "They are attempting the evacuation alone." "This is foolishness," the Talmar ambassador said. "They cannot possibly succeed. Their economy will collapse. Their expansion will be delayed by decades. And for what? They will save a fraction of the Varani and lose everything they've worked for." Vren, the Shaper ambassador, stood up. Their skin was bright red, anger. "Perhaps," Vren said, "humanity understands something we have forgotten. That the measure of civilization is not in our calculations, but in our compassion." "Compassion doesn't pay bills," the Talmar shot back. "Compassion doesn't maintain infrastructure. The humans are being emotional and irrational, and we are being cowards," Vren said. The chamber erupted in argument. Half the species defended their decision. The other half began to question it. But in the end, it didn't matter. The vote was done. The decision was made. All they could do now was watch humanity try to do the impossible. In Varani space, the operation began. The first humans to land on the Varani homeworld were a team of linguists, doctors, and engineers. They stepped off their shuttle onto a world that smelled of growing things and felt the heavy gravity pulling at them. Varani gravity was 30% higher than Earth's, making every movement harder, every breath more difficult. The humans didn't complain. They got to work. Captain Sarah Mitchell led the ground operations. She was a military officer, trained for combat, but this was different from any mission she'd ever led. Her team set up coordination centers in 12 major Varani cities. They established communication networks, medical stations, and processing centers. The Varani came in waves, families carrying whatever they could fit in their arms, old people who moved slowly, helped by younger relatives, children who didn't fully understand what was happening, but knew they had to leave. The humans greeted each group with smiles and open arms, despite the exhaustion, despite the pressure, despite the knowledge that they had impossible quotas to meet. A Varani mother approached Captain Mitchell's station with 3 children. She looked terrified. "Is this real?" the mother asked in broken English, learned from the translation guides the humans had broadcast. "Are you really saving us?" Mitchell knelt down to be at eye level with the Varani woman. "Yes," she said. "We're taking you home." "Home?" the woman asked, confused. "But our home is dying." Mitchell smiled. "Then you'll share ours." The woman began to cry. This scene repeated millions of times across the Varani world. Humans meeting Varani, helping them board ships, promising them safety. The language barrier was huge. The cultural differences were significant. But somehow it worked. Humans pointed and gestured. Varani nodded and followed. They figured it out together. The ships filled up quickly. Each vessel was packed far beyond its designed capacity. Life support systems strained. Food supplies were rationed. Privacy was non-existent, but the Varani didn't complain. They were alive. They were leaving. They had hope. Back on Earth, the news showed constant updates. People watched the evacuation like a sporting event, cheering when each ship departed full of refugees, groaning when problems occurred. The entire planet was invested in Operation Exodus. The economic impact hit immediately. The stock market crashed as resources were redirected. Construction projects halted. Consumer goods became scarce. The government imposed rationing on certain supplies. People grumbled, but no one seriously suggested stopping the operation. There were a few protests, small groups who argued that Earth should focus on its own problems. But they were drowned out by the majority who wore "We Stand With You" badges and donated whatever they could spare. President Okonkwo addressed the planet after the first week of operations. "I won't lie to you," he said. "This is going to hurt. We're going to feel this pain for years, maybe decades. Our expansion plans are stopped. Our prosperity is delayed. We're poorer today than we were last week, and we'll be poorer still tomorrow." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "But we'll be able to look at ourselves in the mirror. We'll be able to tell our children that when the galaxy turned its back, we turned and faced the problem. That when someone asked for help, we said yes. That's worth more than any amount of money." The approval ratings for Operation Exodus held at 73%. The Galactic Council watched in disbelief. Financial analysts from a dozen species kept revising their predictions, trying to understand how humanity was sustaining this operation. The math didn't work. The resources should have run out already, but humans kept finding ways. When they ran out of fuel, they pushed their ship's reactors beyond safe limits. When they ran out of food, they rationed harder. When they ran out of living space on ships, they installed temporary quarters and cargo holds. A Krill scientist ran the numbers and presented his findings to the council. "Humanity is operating at 140% of their calculated capacity," he said. "This should not be possible. Their ships should be breaking down. Their economy should have collapsed. Their people should be rioting. But they're not." Friend said quietly. "No," the scientist confirmed. "They are not." 3 weeks into the operation, the first ships arrived at human colonies with Varani refugees. Temporary camps had been set up on Mars, Europa, and 3 colony worlds. The Varani stepped off the ships onto alien worlds and were greeted by humans offering food, shelter, and medical care. A journalist interviewed a young Varani man named Kelish as he stepped onto Mars for the first time. "What do you think of your new home?" the journalist asked. Kelish looked around at the red desert, the domed habitats, the thin atmosphere that required masks to breathe. It was nothing like his green, fertile world. "It's beautiful," he said, tears in his eyes, "because we're alive to see it." The interview went viral across human space. Back on Varani, the evacuation continued day and night. Ships landed, loaded refugees and left. Then more ships came. The fleet operated like a machine, each part coordinated, each movement planned. But it wasn't a cold, calculating operation. It was humans and Varani working together. learning each other's names, sharing stories despite the language barriers, becoming friends in the middle of disaster. Captain Mitchell barely slept. She coordinated landing schedules, resolved conflicts, and personally helped load refugees when her teams were overwhelmed. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant James Park, found her one night sitting on a loading ramp, her head in her hands. "Captain," he asked, "you okay?" She looked up. Her eyes were red from exhaustion. "We've moved 300 million, she said. 300 million, James. That's incredible. That's more than anyone thought possible. But there are still 3.7 billion left, and we only have 16 months. Park sat down beside her. "Then we work faster." Mitchell laughed a tired sound. "We're already working at maximum. The ships can't go any faster. The crews are exhausted. We're pushing everything past its limits. Then we'll push further," Park said simply. She looked at him. "You really believe we can do this?" "I believe we have to try," he said. "And I believe that if anyone can pull off the impossible, it's us. We're humans. Being stubborn is kind of our thing." Mitchell smiled and stood up. "All right then, let's get back to work." Across the galaxy, something unexpected was happening. The other species were watching humanity's effort, and some of them were starting to feel ashamed. The evacuation entered its third month, and the impossible was becoming routine. Every day, thousands of ships made the trip between Varani space and human colonies. Every day, millions of Varani left their dying world. Every day, humans worked until they collapsed, then got up and worked some more. Captain Marcus Reeves commanded the cargo vessel Steady Hand, a ship that had spent 30 years hauling mining equipment between asteroid fields. Now it carried families instead of machinery. The cargo holds had been converted into living spaces with hammocks, portable toilets, and recycled air that smelled like too many bodies in too small a space. Marcus didn't care about comfort. He cared about capacity. His ship was rated for 500 passengers. He carried 3,000 every trip. "Captain, engineering says we're pushing the engines too hard," his first officer Yuki Tanaka said during their 5th trip of the week. "They want to reduce speed. Tell engineering that every hour we save is another family that gets off that planet," Marcus replied. "We maintain speed." Yuki hesitated. "Sir, if the engines fail while we're in FTL travel, they won't fail. And if they do, we'll fix them. We always do." Yuki nodded and went back to work. She had learned not to argue with Marcus when he got that look in his eyes. The look that said he would move mountains with his bare hands if necessary. Down in the cargo hold, a Varani child named Shala played with a toy her father had made from spare parts. It was supposed to be a bird, one of the flying creatures from their homeworld. She had never seen a real bird. They had all died months ago when the temperature started dropping. Her mother, Nyla, watched her daughter play and tried not to cry. Everything they had owned was gone. Their home, their farm, the tree that had been in their family for 6 generations, all left behind on a dying world. They had been allowed 2 bags each, 2 bags to contain an entire life. But they were alive. They were safe. The humans had come. Neela had tried to thank the captain when they boarded. She had practiced the English words, "Thank you for saving us." But when she saw Marcus, tall and tired, and working so hard, the words had caught in her throat. He had just smiled at her and said something she didn't understand, but his tone was kind. Now she taught Shala the English words the humans had given them. "Hello, thank you. Please, friend." Simple words, but important ones. Back on Varani, the evacuation faced new challenges every day. The dying sun's radiation increased in unpredictable bursts. Some regions became uninhabitable faster than predicted. Evacuation schedules had to be constantly revised. Cities that were supposed to have 6 months suddenly had 3 weeks. Captain Sarah Mitchell's ground team adapted constantly. They moved operations, rerouted ships, and pushed themselves harder. Sleep became a luxury. Meals were eaten standing up. Personal hygiene became optional. Mitchell stood in the command center of the largest evacuation site, watching the boards that tracked every ship, every group of refugees, every problem that arose. Red lights indicated delays. Yellow meant complications. Green meant on schedule. The board was mostly yellow and red. Her communicator beeped. It was Ambassador Chen calling from Earth. Captain Mitchell, status report. We're at 520 million evacuated, Mitchell said. Ahead of schedule, but barely. The radiation bursts are making things difficult. We lost a landing zone yesterday. Had to reroute 3 ships. Any casualties? Mitchell's jaw tightened. 43 Varani died in the evacuation zone before we could get them out. The radiation was too strong. Silence on the line. Then Chen spoke, her voice heavy. Those are the first deaths since we started. Yes, ma'am. And they won't be the last. The sun is accelerating its collapse. Our timeline is shrinking. Can we make it? Mitchell looked at the boards, at the red and yellow lights, at the numbers that never seemed to get smaller fast enough. I don't know, she admitted, but we're going to try until the last possible second. That's all anyone can ask, Chen said. Keep going, Captain. We're all counting on you. The call ended. Mitchell turned back to her team. All right, people. We have 3 million Varani in the northern continent who need evacuation by tomorrow. The radiation is spiking. We need to move them now. Coordinate with the fleet. Get every available ship to those landing zones. Move. Her team scattered, shouting orders, making calls, solving problems. This was what humans did best. When faced with impossible odds, they just worked harder. The Galactic Council continued to watch, and their confusion grew into something else. Respect. Reluctant, uncomfortable respect. Ambassador Vren called a private meeting with 5 other ambassadors, species who had voted against the rescue, but were now questioning that decision. Humanity is succeeding, Vren said. Against all predictions, against all logic. They are saving the Varani. They haven't saved them all yet, the Talmar ambassador pointed out. There are still billions left, but they've saved hundreds of millions already. More than we thought possible, more than we were willing to try. An ambassador from the Whispering Collective, beings that communicated through chemical signals, released a scent that translated to deep thought. The question becomes, what does their success say about us? The ambassadors sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, one spoke. Ambassador Kelsch of the Vorin, a species of mathematicians and philosophers. It says we chose calculation over compassion. We chose economics over ethics. We made the logical choice, and they made the moral one. And now we must face the possibility that logic alone is not enough to call ourselves civilized. Back on the steady hand, Marcus Reeves dealt with a crisis. The ship's main reactor was overheating. They were 3 days from the nearest human colony, with a full load of refugees. Captain, we need to drop out of FTL and let the reactor cool, Yuki said. If we don't, it could fail completely. How long would that delay us? Marcus asked. 6 hours, maybe 8. Marcus did the math in his head. 6 hours meant they'd miss their departure window from the colony. Miss that window, and they'd lose an entire day. An entire day meant one less trip before time ran out. We maintain speed, Marcus said. Sir, I said we maintain speed. Route all non-essential power to cooling. Shut down everything we don't need to keep this ship moving and these people breathing. Yuki started to argue, then saw the look on his face. She nodded and went to work. Down in engineering, Chief Engineer Paulo Santos looked at the readouts and swore in 3 languages. The captain was going to get them all killed. The reactor was at 130% of maximum safe temperature. If it went up another 5%, they'd have a containment failure. Paulo made a decision. He went down to the reactor room itself, a space so hot that his skin immediately started sweating. He manually adjusted the coolant flow, overriding the automatic systems. It was dangerous. If he made a mistake, the reactor could explode. But if he didn't do it, they'd have to slow down, and slowing down meant fewer Varani saved. Paulo had never met the refugees in the cargo hold. He didn't know their names or their stories, but he knew they were people, and they needed to get to safety. He made the adjustment. The temperature stabilized. The reactor held. Paulo climbed out of the reactor room with first-degree burns on his arms and hands. He went straight to medical, got bandaged up, and went back to work. When Marcus heard what Paulo had done, he went down to engineering personally. You could have been killed, Marcus said. Paulo shrugged. So could all of us every day we do this? But we don't stop. Marcus looked at his engineer, at the bandages on his arms, at the exhaustion in his eyes. Then he held out his hand. "Thank you," Marcus said. Paolo shook his hand. "We stand with them, Captain. All the way." The phrase had become more than a slogan. It was a promise, a commitment. Every human involved in Operation Exodus lived by those words. On Mars, the refugee camps were growing into small cities. Temporary housing became semi-permanent. Varani families settled in, started learning English, began adapting to their new lives. Human volunteers worked with them, teaching, helping, becoming friends. A teacher named Rachel Kim worked with Varani children, teaching them about Earth and human culture. The children were quick learners, eager to understand their rescuers. "Why did you come?" a young Varani boy asked her one day. "Your people didn't have to help us." Rachel thought about how to explain it in simple words. "Because when someone is in trouble, you help them," she said. "That's what good people do. But it cost you so much," the boy said. "My father says Earth's economy is suffering." "It is," Rachel admitted. "Things are harder now. People have less money, fewer things. But we have you. We have new friends, and that's worth more than money." The boy considered this. "Humans are strange," he said finally. "But I like you." Rachel laughed and ruffled his fur. "We like you too." These small moments of connection happened millions of times across human space. Humans and Varani learning about each other, sharing meals, teaching each other words in their languages, building relationships. The rescue wasn't just about saving lives. It was about welcoming new family. Back in Varani space, month 4 brought a new crisis. A massive radiation storm erupted from the dying sun, stronger than anything predicted. It swept across a quarter of the planet, making 3 entire continents uninhabitable overnight. 250 million Varani lived in those regions. Captain Mitchell received the alert and felt ice in her stomach. They had 72 hours before the radiation killed everyone in those areas. Maybe less. She did the math. Every available ship, maximum capacity, no breaks. They could evacuate maybe 180 million. 70 million would die. Mitchell refused to accept it. "Get every ship in the fleet," she ordered. "I don't care if they're scheduled for other regions. I don't care if they're in transit. I want every vessel that can fly to those continents now. Captain, that will delay evacuation in other areas. I don't care. We save who we can save right now, and we'll deal with the rest later. Move." Ships diverted from across the system. Human crews pushed their vessels past every safety limit. They landed in radiation-soaked zones, loaded refugees as fast as possible, and blasted off again. Some ships took damage. Some crews got sick from radiation exposure, but they kept going. Marcus Reeves brought the steady hand into the worst zone, an area where radiation was so strong that his ship's sensors screamed warnings. He ignored them. "We're landing at coordinates provided," he told his crew. 30 minutes on the ground, maximum. Get everyone aboard that you can." They landed in a city that was dying. The Varani there had been preparing for death. Now suddenly, there were ships. There was hope. The loading was chaotic. Thousands of Varani rushed the ships. Human crews tried to maintain order, but panic was setting in. People pushed, climbed over each other, desperate to escape. Marcus stood at the loading ramp, helping people aboard, pulling children up, supporting elderly Varani who could barely walk. The radiation alarms on his suit screamed. He ignored them. "Captain, we're at 4,000 people," Yuki shouted over the comm. "We need to go." Marcus looked at the crowd still waiting. Hundreds more, maybe thousands. 5 minutes more, he shouted back. "Sir, the radiation. 5 minutes." They loaded as many as they could. When they finally lifted off, the steady hand carried 4,300 refugees. The ship groaned under the weight. The engines struggled, but they made it to orbit. Behind them, other ships did the same. Every captain pushed beyond their limits. Every crew member worked until they collapsed. When the 72 hours ended, and the radiation became too strong for any ship to land, Mitchell got the final count. 237 million evacuated. 13 million dead. Mitchell stood in her command center and stared at that number. 13 million. 13 million people they couldn't save. 13 million who had died while humans tried their best. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to quit. Instead, she took a breath and turned to her team. "We have 3 billion left to save," she said, "and less time than we thought. So we work harder. We work faster. And we don't give up. Not ever." Her team nodded, their faces grim, but determined. The evacuation continued. The Galactic Council watched the crisis and its aftermath. They saw humanity's desperate effort. They saw the ships pushing past all safety limits. They saw the 13 million dead and the 237 million saved. Ambassador Thixon called another meeting. "Humanity has lost 13 million Varani," they said. "This tragedy was inevitable. They cannot save them all. But they saved 237 million that we would have let die," Vren said quietly. The chamber fell silent. "They are still trying," Vren continued. "Despite the losses, despite the cost, despite everything we said was impossible, they are still trying." "What is your point, Ambassador Vren?" Thixon asked. Vren's skin turned deep blue, sadness and shame. "My point is that we were wrong. Not about the mathematics. The mathematics was correct, but we were wrong about what matters. Humanity has shown us that some things are more important than efficiency. That compassion is not weakness. That trying to do the impossible is better than accepting the unacceptable." Several ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. "They are showing us what we should have been," Vren said. Month 7 brought humanity to the breaking point. The evacuation had saved 1.9 billion Varani, but 2.1 billion remained on the dying world. The sun's collapse was accelerating faster than any models had predicted. The timeline that had started at 18 months was now down to 8, and humanity was running out of everything. Ships were breaking down faster than they could be repaired. The constant stress of operating beyond safe limits was taking its toll. Reactors failed. Life support systems crashed. Structural damage from radiation exposure made vessels unsafe. 3 ships had been lost completely, destroyed when their overstressed systems finally gave out. All crew and passengers had been rescued. But the loss of those vessels meant fewer trips, fewer people saved. The human economy was in free fall. The stock market had crashed so hard that trading was suspended. Unemployment hit 30% as industries collapsed without resources. Food rationing on Earth had gotten stricter. People went hungry so that refugees could eat. President Okonkwo stood before the Earth Council, looking older than his years. The weight of billions of lives pressed down on him. "The economic analysis is clear," he said, his voice heavy. "We cannot sustain this operation much longer. Our reserves are depleted. Our infrastructure is failing. We are asking our people to sacrifice more than any generation has ever been asked to sacrifice." "Are you suggesting we stop?" someone asked. Okonkwo's eyes flashed with anger. "No, I'm suggesting we find a way to do more, because stopping is not an option. We made a promise. We keep it. But even determination had limits. The numbers didn't lie. At their current rate, humanity could evacuate maybe another billion Varani before the planet became uninhabitable. That would leave over 1 billion to die. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough." Ambassador Chen sat in her office, staring at projections that refused to add up no matter how many times she ran them. The door opened, and Thix entered, their crystalline form reflecting the dim light. "Ambassador Chen," Thix said, "we need to talk." Chen gestured to a chair. Thix sat, moving slowly, carefully. "You have accomplished more than we thought possible," Thix said. "Your species has shown remarkable determination, but the mathematics remain unchanged. You cannot save them all." "We're going to try," Chen said. "At what cost? Your civilization is tearing itself apart. Your economy is collapsing. Your people are suffering. How much more will you sacrifice?" "As much as it takes." Thix leaned forward. "What if I told you there was another way? Several species on the council have watched your efforts. They are impressed. Some are even ashamed. They want to help." Chen looked up, hope flickering in her chest. "They'll send ships?" "No," Thix said. "They'll send resources, fuel, supplies, technology, to improve your ship efficiency. But there's a price." The hope died. "What price?" "Trade agreements, favorable terms for their corporations, access to human markets, resource extraction rights on your colony worlds. They want to help, but they also want to profit. Chen felt sick. They're trying to exploit our desperation. They're business people. This is what business people do. Tell them no, a sound like wind through crystal caves. Ambassador Chen, pride is a luxury you cannot afford. Your operation is failing. You need help. These terms, while unfavorable, would save lives. By enslaving ourselves? By letting them profit from suffering? No. We do this ourselves or not at all. Then billions will die. Billions are already dying. Chen stood up, anger burning through her exhaustion. We've lost 13 million. We'll lose more, but we won't lose our souls in the process. Tell your business people that humanity's compassion is not for sale. And walk to the door. You are a stubborn species. Admirable. Foolish, but admirable. They paused. For what it's worth, I hope you succeed. I hope you prove us all wrong. They left. Chen sat back down and put her head in her hands. In Varani space, Captain Marcus Reeves faced his own crisis. The steady hand had made 47 trips between the Varani world and human colonies. 47 times pushing the engines too hard. The reactor too hot. Every system beyond safe limits. On trip 48, halfway to the colony, the reactor finally gave up. Captain, we've got a containment failure in Reactor 2, Paulo shouted over the intercom. I'm initiating emergency shutdown. The ship dropped out of FTL travel, with a lurch that threw everyone against their restraints. Emergency lights flickered on. Alarm klaxons wailed. Marcus ran to engineering. The reactor room was filled with smoke and the smell of burning electronics. Paulo and his team were frantically working to prevent a complete meltdown. Status? Marcus demanded. Reactor 2 is gone, Paulo said, his face covered in soot. Reactor 1 is holding, but barely. We can't jump to FTL. We're stuck. Marcus felt cold settle in his stomach. Can we repair it? Not without parts we don't have. And a shipyard we're weeks away from. In the cargo hold, 3,000 Varani refugees waited in darkness. They didn't understand what had happened, but they felt the ship's distress. Children cried. Parents held them close. Everyone wondered if they had escaped their dying world only to die in space. Marcus called for a fleet-wide broadcast. This is Captain Reeves of the Steady Hand. We've had a reactor failure. We're dead in space with 3,000 refugees and no way to reach the colony. We need assistance. The response came quickly. Too quickly. It was Captain Sarah Mitchell. Captain Reeves, this is Mitchell. What's your position? Marcus gave her the coordinates. We're pulling all nearby ships to assist, Mitchell said. But Reeves, we need your ship. The fleet can't afford to lose a vessel. Understood. We'll do what we can. But they all knew the truth. The Steady Hand was finished. Even if they could tow it to a shipyard, repairs would take months. Months they didn't have. Yuki found Marcus on the bridge, staring at the dead controls. Sir, she said quietly, the crew wants you to know if we have to stay here. If we have to be the ship that doesn't make it back, we're okay with that. Marcus looked at her. Yuki, we knew the risks when we signed up. Every trip could be our last. We've saved over 150,000 Varani on this ship. That's enough. That's a life well spent. Marcus felt his throat tighten. His crew. His brave, stupid, wonderful crew. We're not giving up yet, he said. Rescue ships arrived within hours. They couldn't repair the Steady Hand, but they could transfer the refugees. One by one, the Varani were moved to other vessels. The operation took 12 hours of careful work in the vacuum of space. When the last refugee was transferred, Marcus stood on his empty ship. The Steady Hand had been his home for 15 years. He knew every creak, every quirk, every sound she made. Now she was silent. Captain, Yuki said, shuttle's ready. We need to go. Marcus took one last look around the bridge. Then he followed his crew to the shuttle. As they pulled away, he watched the Steady Hand drift in space, dead and dark. One more sacrifice, in an operation built on sacrifices. Back on Earth, the news of the Steady Hand spread. She wasn't the only ship lost. 17 vessels now sat dead in space, abandoned when their systems failed. The crews had been rescued, but the ships were gone. The public support began to waver. Protests grew larger. Not everyone opposed the operation, but more people questioned whether it was worth the cost. We're destroying ourselves to save aliens we don't even know. One protester shouted at a rally. When does it end? When do we say enough? But others shouted back. We made a promise. We don't abandon people to die. That's not who we are. The debate raged across human space. Families argued. Friends stopped speaking. The unity that had driven Operation Exodus was beginning to crack. President Okonkwo called Ambassador Chen. The council is pressuring me to accept the trade deals, he said. They say we don't have a choice anymore. There's always a choice, Chen replied. Is there? I'm watching my people suffer. I'm watching them go hungry, lose their jobs, fight with each other. And for what? We can't save them all anyway. Maybe we should take the help and save who we can. If we take those deals, we're telling the galaxy that compassion has a price, that morality can be bought and sold. Is that the lesson you want to teach? Okonkwo was quiet for a long time. No, he finally said. But I don't know how much longer we can hold out. Then we hold out as long as we can. We save as many as we can, and we do it on our terms. In Varani space, Captain Mitchell coordinated the final phases of the evacuation. The planet was dying faster now. Whole regions were becoming uninhabitable every week. The sky was darker, the temperature dropping, the air growing thin. 400 million Varani remained. Mitchell knew they couldn't save them all. The math was brutal and unavoidable. Even if every ship made perfect runs with no delays, no problems, no failures, they would fall short. But humanity didn't know how to quit. A crisis came in month 8. The northern hemisphere of Varani experienced a massive radiation burst, worse than anything before. 50 million people lived in the affected zone. They had hours, maybe minutes, before the radiation killed them. Every available ship dove toward the planet. Captains threw out every safety protocol, every regulation, every rule that said what they were doing was impossible. Marcus Reeves, now commanding a smaller vessel after losing the steady hand, pushed his new ship harder than he'd ever pushed the old one. Around him, dozens of other ships did the same. They landed in zones where sensors said landing was suicide. They loaded refugees while radiation alarms screamed, and they saved lives. When the crisis ended, they had evacuated 43 million. 7 million had died before the ships could reach them. Mitchell took the report and added those 7 million to the count. 20 million dead now. 20 million they couldn't save. But 3.8 billion saved. 3.8 billion who were alive because humanity refused to accept the unacceptable. Ambassador Chen received a private message from Ambassador Vren of the Shapers. I am ashamed. Vren's message said, my people are ashamed. We watched you struggle while we did nothing. That changes now. Chen read the message twice, not daring to hope. The next day, 5 Shaper vessels arrived in Varani space. They were small ships, not enough to change the operation significantly. But they were help, real help with no strings attached. We cannot undo our decision not to help, the Shaper captain said. But we can choose to help now. Tell us where you need us. Mitchell assigned them to the most dangerous evacuation zones. The Shapers accepted without complaint. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 more species sent ships. Not many, a handful each, but enough to matter. Enough to show that humanity's effort had inspired something in them. Shame, perhaps, or guilt, or maybe just the realization that the humans were right. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. Tixan stood before the assembled ambassadors. Several species have violated our decision and sent aid to humanity's operation. Tixan said, this is unprecedented. The Council voted against intervention. The Council was wrong, Vran said, standing. I was wrong. We all were. Humanity has shown us that our precious stability, our careful calculations, our economic models, none of it matters if we lose our compassion in the process. Compassion doesn't pay for civilization, the Talmar ambassador argued. No, Vren agreed. But without it, civilization isn't worth paying for. The debate raged for hours. In the end, the Council took no action against the species that sent help. They couldn't. Too many voices were questioning the original decision. Too many were asking the uncomfortable question. If a young, poor species like humanity could sacrifice so much to save strangers, what did it say about the older, richer species that refused? In Varani space, the evacuation entered its final phase. 2 months remained. 400 million Varani still needed rescue. The fleet was a shadow of what it had been. Half the original ships were out of service. The crews were exhausted beyond measure. Resources were almost gone. But they kept going. Marcus Reeves brought his ship down for another run. He had lost count of how many trips he'd made. The numbers all blurred together. What he did know was that every trip mattered. Every person saved was a victory against the cold mathematics that said they should have given up. He stood at the loading ramp, helping Varani families board, and made them a silent promise. "We'll get you out, all of you, or we'll die trying." The final month arrived like a countdown to execution. The Varani sun pulsed with unstable energy, casting an orange-red glow across the dying world. Atmospheric pressure was dropping. Temperatures had fallen below freezing in regions that used to be tropical. The planet was dying, and everyone could feel it. 380 million Varani remained. The human fleet, reinforced by ships from 7 other species, worked around the clock. Ships landed, loaded, lifted off, jumped to colonies, unloaded and returned. The cycle repeated endlessly. Crews worked in shifts that blurred together. Sleep happened in stolen moments. Food was eaten while running. Captain Sarah Mitchell had been on the planet's surface for 9 months. She had lost 20 pounds. Her hair had gone partially gray. She couldn't remember the last time she'd slept more than 3 hours. None of that mattered. What mattered was the board in her command center. The one that counted refugees evacuated. 3.7 billion saved. 380 million to go. Captain Marcus Reeves made his 200th trip. His new ship, a vessel he'd never bothered to name because he didn't expect it to survive, groaned under the weight of 4,000 Varani. The engines whined. The reactor temperature climbed into the red zone. None of his crew complained. They knew what was at stake. In the cargo hold, a Varani elder named Thesk sat with his grandchildren, teaching them songs from his childhood. Songs about their homeworld, about the green fields and the warm sun, and the way the wind felt on a perfect day. His grandchildren listened, trying to memorize a world they would never see again. Thesk had been a farmer like his father and grandfather before him. His family had worked the same land for 300 years. Now that land was cold and dead, and he was flying through space in a human ship, going to a world he couldn't even imagine. But he was alive. His grandchildren were alive. The humans had given them that gift. On Earth, President Okonkwo addressed the planet one last time before the final evacuation push. "We are tired," he said, his voice carrying across every screen, every speaker, every device on Earth and her colonies. "We are broke. We are hungry. We have sacrificed more than any generation in human history, and I'm asking you to sacrifice just a little bit more." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "One more month. That's all we need. One more month of effort, of sacrifice, of standing together, and we can save them all. Every last Varani can leave that dying world and start a new life. But only if we hold on for one more month." He took a breath. "I know you're tired of hearing about duty and compassion and doing the right thing. I know you want this to be over. So do I. But we're so close. We're right at the finish line, and I'm asking you, begging you to run just a little bit further, to give just a little bit more. Because if we quit now, if we stop when we're this close, then everything we've sacrificed will have been for nothing." Okonkwo's eyes glistened with tears he didn't bother to hide. "The galaxy is watching us. History is watching us. Our children will ask us what we did when people needed help. And I want to tell them that we helped all the way to the very end. That we didn't give up, not even when it hurt, not even when it seemed impossible. That we stood with them." The broadcast ended. For a moment, Earth was silent. Then something happened. Something unexpected. The protests stopped. The arguments ended. The division that had been tearing humanity apart suddenly healed. People looked at each other and made a collective decision. One more month. They could do one more month. Donations flooded in. Every family gave whatever they could spare. Companies donated supplies. Volunteers signed up for whatever jobs needed doing. Humanity, exhausted and broken suffering, decided to finish what they started. The approval rating for Operation Exodus climbed back to 81%. In Varani space, the final push began. Every ship made maximum trips. Every crew pushed past exhaustion. The handful of alien vessels that had joined the operation worked just as hard, their crews inspired by human determination. Ambassador Chen arrived in Varani space personally taking command of a transport ship. If this was the final month she wanted to be there, she wanted to help. Her first trip down to the planet, she met Captain Mitchell in person for the first time. The two women stood in the evacuation center surrounded by chaos and shook hands. "You look terrible," Chen said. Mitchell laughed, a harsh sound. "You should see the other guy." The other guy being this entire operation. "Can we do it? Can we save them all?" Mitchell looked at the boards, at the numbers that kept ticking down but never fast enough, at the timeline that was shrinking every day as the sun's collapse accelerated. "Honestly, I don't know. We're right on the edge. It's going to come down to the last day, maybe the last hour. But we're going to try. We're going to try until the planet literally explodes under our feet." Chen nodded. "Then let's get to work." The final weeks were a blur of desperate activity. Ships that should have been decommissioned kept flying. Crews that should have collapsed kept working. Systems that should have failed kept running. The Varani people, seeing the end approaching, helped in every way they could. They organized themselves, created efficient loading procedures, took care of each other. Children helped elderly Varani board ships. Families looked after each other's belongings. Everyone worked together because they understood this was their last chance. With 2 weeks left, a crisis struck. The sun erupted with a massive solar flare stronger than anything recorded. The electromagnetic pulse fried electronics across the planet's surface. 30 ships on the ground lost power. They were dead, grounded, unable to fly. 80,000 Varani were on those ships. Captain Marcus Reeves was in orbit when he got the news. His first officer, Lieutenant James Park, looked at him with desperate eyes. "Captain, we can't get to them. The radiation from the flare is too strong. Any ship that enters the atmosphere will be fried just like those ships were." Marcus looked at the readings. Park was right. It was suicide to go down there. "How long until the radiation clears?" Marcus asked. 6 hours. Maybe 8. We don't have 8 hours. That zone is going to be uninhabitable in 4 hours. Then those people are dead, sir. There's nothing we can do." Marcus stared at the planet, at the orange-red sun, at the impossible situation. Then he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. "You know what I love about impossible situations?" he said. "They let you try really stupid solutions." He turned to his crew. "Reroute all power to shields. Everything. Life support to minimum. Engines to minimum. Every single watt we have goes to shields." "Sir, even with maximum shields, I know. But we're going down anyway. Everyone suit up. If the shields fail, at least the suits will buy us a few minutes." Park stared at him. "You're insane." "Probably. You coming?" Park's face split into a crazy grin. "Wouldn't miss it." Marcus broadcast to the other ships. "Any vessel willing to make an insane atmospheric entry through lethal radiation to save 80,000 Varani, follow me down." 19 ships answered the call. They dove into the atmosphere, shields at maximum, hulls screaming as radiation hammered them. Inside the ships, crews watched as shield strength dropped. 90%, 80, 70. Electronics failed. Backup systems kicked in. Alarms wailed. They kept going. Marcus's ship hit the ground hard, the landing gear barely deploying in time. Around him, other ships crashed down. Some landed smoothly, others skidded across the ground. One ship's landing gear failed completely, and it belly flopped onto the tarmac. But they were down. 30 minutes, Marcus shouted to his crew. "Get those refugees loaded in 30 minutes or we're all dead." The crews ran out into deadly radiation, their suits providing minimal protection. They threw open the grounded ships, pulled out the Varani refugees, and loaded them onto the rescue vessels. 28 minutes later, the last refugee was aboard. The rescue ships lifted off, their shields failing, their systems dying, held together by determination and luck. All 19 ships made it back to orbit. Barely. One ship lost shields completely during ascent and took massive radiation damage. The crew would need months of medical treatment, but they lived, and they had saved 80,000 Varani. When Mitchell heard what Reeves had done, she contacted him personally. "Captain Reeves, what you did was the stupidest, most reckless, Most dangerous thing I've ever heard of. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said, grinning despite his exhaustion. It was also the bravest. Well done. With 1 week left, they had evacuated 4 billion Varani. 90 million remained. The planet was almost uninhabitable now. The temperature had dropped to -20 Celsius. The atmosphere was thin. The sky was a constant angry red from the dying sun. But 90 million Varani still clung to life, waiting for rescue. The fleet made a final push. Every ship, every crew, every ounce of effort. They abandoned sleep completely. They operated on stimulants and willpower. Ships flew when they shouldn't. Systems worked when they had no right to work. 3 days before the sun's final collapse, they evacuated the last major city. 60 million Varani loaded onto ships and escaped. 2 days before the end, they cleared the smaller towns. 20 million more saved. 1 day before the end, only 10 million Varani remained, scattered across remote areas. The planet was dying under their feet. The ground shook with constant earthquakes. The sky was dark. The sun pulsed with energy that would soon tear it apart. The fleet split up, each ship racing to a different location, grabbing whoever they could find. There was no organization now, no careful planning, just humans and aliens running across a dying world, pulling Varani into ships and blasting off before the ground collapsed beneath them. Ambassador Chen piloted her ship to a small farming village where 3,000 Varani had been trapped when their evacuation was delayed. She landed in a field, ran out, and helped load families. An elderly Varani woman grabbed her arm. "Why?" the woman asked in broken English. "Why do this for us?" Chen looked at her, this stranger from another world, and knew the answer. "Because you asked," she said simply, "and because saying yes is what makes us human." And 6 hours before the sun's collapse, Captain Marcus Reeves was making his final run. His ship was falling apart. Half his systems were offline. The hull had radiation damage that would never be repaired. But he had found the last group of Varani, a community of artists who had refused to leave their home until the very end. 500 people. He loaded them onto his dying ship. As he lifted off, the ground beneath the launch pad cracked and fell away. 5 hours before the end, Captain Mitchell evacuated the last remaining evacuation center. She was the last human on the planet's surface. She stood there for a moment, looking at the dead world, the dark sky, the dying sun. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Then she boarded her ship and left. The entire fleet gathered at the edge of the system, watching the Varani sun enter its final moments. Every ship, every crew, every refugee, watched as the star that had given life to their world prepared to take it away. The sun collapsed, then exploded in a brilliant supernova. The Varani homeworld was consumed instantly, turned to vapor and dust. The shockwave expanded, a wall of destruction that would sterilize everything in the system. The fleet jumped to FTL, just as the wave reached them, escaping by seconds. When they emerged in human space, Captain Mitchell broadcast the final count. 4,096,753,000 Varani evacuated. The remaining losses, those who died before humanity arrived, those who died in radiation bursts, those who were simply too far to reach, totaled just over 3 million. They had saved more than 99%. The impossible had become real. 6 months later, the Galactic Council convened. The chamber was different now. New seats had been added. Varani representatives sat among the council, given provisional membership. Ambassador Chen stood before the assembly, no longer in the small back seat. Humanity had been granted full membership, full voting rights. The probation was over. Ambassador Thixen called the session to order. "We are here to recognize the events of the past year," Thixen said. "Humanity launched an operation that we declared impossible. They succeeded where we said they would fail. They saved over 4 billion people while we watched and did nothing." Thixen paused, their crystalline form seeming smaller, dimmer. "We were wrong. Not about the mathematics. The cost was exactly what we predicted. Humanity's economy has suffered greatly. Their expansion has been delayed by decades. The price they paid was enormous. But we were wrong about cost. We calculated that the cost outweighed the benefit. We forgot that some things cannot be measured in credits and resources." Ambassador Ren stood, their skin a deep remorseful blue. 23 species wish to formally apologize, Wren said. We abandoned the Varani. We chose economics over ethics. Humanity reminded us what civilization truly means. The Varani ambassador, the same small-furred woman who had begged for help a year ago, stood to speak. We asked the galaxy for mercy, she said, her voice steady now, strong. We received mathematics. We received cold calculations that said our lives were not worth the cost. Then we asked humanity, and they answered with everything they had. They gave us their ships, their resources, their time. They gave us their safety, their prosperity, their future. They gave until it hurt, and then they gave more. She looked around the chamber. Humanity has no great technology. They are not the strongest or the richest, but they have something that all your calculations cannot measure. They have compassion that cannot be bought. They have determination that cannot be broken. They have souls that refuse to accept that some people are worth saving and others are not. The Varani ambassador's voice grew stronger. Today, we Varani live on human worlds. We share human homes. We learn human languages. We are becoming part of human society. And we understand now that we were not rescued by a species. We were welcomed by a family, because that is what humanity does. They stand with you when the stars go dark. The chamber erupted in applause. Not all species joined in, but enough did. Enough to show that something had changed. The council voted on new protocols that day, protocols that prioritized compassion over cost. That required intervention in cases of planetary catastrophe. That recognized some decisions couldn't be made with mathematics alone. The We Stand With You doctrine became official galactic policy. Humanity was given a permanent seat on the Council's executive committee. They were given veto power over decisions that abandoned sentient species to die. The young, reckless species that had joined just years ago was now one of the most influential voices in galactic politics. Because they had proven something important. They had proven that doing the impossible was sometimes the only moral choice. On Mars, in the largest Varani settlement, a monument was erected. It was simple, a sculpture of a human and a Varani standing together, looking up at the stars. The inscription read, "To humanity, who proved that the measure of civilization is not what you calculate, but what you dare. You taught us that family is not about biology. It is about who stands beside you when the stars go dark. We stand with you, always." Ambassador Chen attended the unveiling. She stood beside Captain Mitchell, Captain Reeves, and thousands of humans, and Varani who had become friends, neighbors, family. A young Varani girl approached her, the daughter of the woman Chen had helped evacuate from that farming village. The girl held a letter in her hands. "I wrote this for you," the girl said in perfect English. Chen read the letter. It was an application for Earth citizenship. The girl wanted to become human, not in biology, but in spirit. She wanted to join the species that had saved her life. Chen knelt down to the girl's level, tears in her eyes. "You already are," Chen said. "Anyone who believes that helping others matters, that compassion is strength, that we don't abandon people when they need us. They're already part of our family. Welcome home." That night, Chen stood on a balcony overlooking the Martian settlement. Millions of lights glowed in the darkness, representing millions of lives, human and Varani, living together, building together, becoming something new together. President Okonkwo joined her. "We did it," he said. "Against every prediction, every calculation, every reasonable expectation, we did it." "We almost didn't," Chen said. "We were so close to failing. But we didn't fail. That's what matters." Chen nodded. "Do you think they'll remember? The galaxy, I mean. Do you think they'll remember what we did here?" Okonkwo smiled. "I think we reminded them of something they forgot. That civilization is not about technology, or wealth, or power. It's about what you do when someone asks for help. It's about standing with others when it would be easier to turn away." He looked at the stars. "They asked for help," he said, "and we answered. That's the story they'll tell. Not about ships, or resources, or economics, but about the day humanity proved that compassion is not weakness, that caring is not foolishness, that sometimes the right choice is the hard choice. And that's a story worth remembering. Chen stood beside him, watching the lights of the settlement, listening to the sounds of two species learning to live together, learning to be family. The galaxy had left them to die. Humanity had answered the call, and in doing so, humanity had changed the galaxy forever.